Plagiarism. The practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. Well, you can pretty much tell what this video is going to be about. Imagine if someone stole your dog, then started an Instagram page to showcase how cute their dog is. Now, normally I don't do book reviews, but recently I came across a title that just really affected me. So much so that I decided to make this little video about it. But before we get to that, here's a little history to get everyone caught up. Back in 2009, when I was a young and impressionable lad, I submitted one of my stories to a webzine called S&M Horror Mag. This story was called Dr. Spindle's House. It won Story of the Month and went on to be published in a 2010 anthology called Bonded by Blood 2, A Romance in Red. Shortly after, I began a working relationship with S&M Horror Mag's editor-in-chief, Stephen Marshall. He edited several of my projects, including a book of poems and short stories called Suspensia, which was published in 2012. In 2014, Stephen Marshall and I had a falling out that led to me removing the majority of the books I published with him, and ultimately leaving social media altogether. Now let's fast forward to 2018. No Clocks, Mirrors, or Windows by Stephen Marshall. Remember Suspensia? That book I mentioned earlier that I published in 2012? Well, I just so happen to have a copy of it right here. And I think you're going to find some very noticeable similarities between the two. Okay, this is how we'll do this. Suspension on the left, no clocks, mirrors, or windows on the right. Okay, here are the inside pages. I'll go over to my book, Suspensia here, as you can clearly see. Copyright 2012, Brett Graham. And we'll head over to No Clocks, Mirrors, or Windows. You can clearly see 2018 Stephen Marshall. Hang on. Before we go any further, I just want to, this is on the inside page of his book. For my dedicated fan base. Aw. Here's Dr. Spindle's house. Okay, and here is a side-by-side of a poem I wrote called Reminders. Now this is where I guess he started to get creative, because as you can see, he changed this title to Abracadaver, where my story was called A Letter to Arthur Fisk. But when you look at them side by side, it's like a fucking mirror. Okay, here's another one where he changed the title, but not much else. As you can see, he called his The Town Drunk, whereas mine's called Jalopy. But if you compare the text, you can see that they are clearly identical. Here is yet another one where he changed the title and nothing else. There is one story and no clocks, mirrors, or windows that isn't mine. But guess what? it's also stolen. Remember Bonded by Blood 2, the 2010 anthology I mentioned earlier? Well, it featured a story called The Pen by an author named Brian John Peer. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Now, on to the review. Well, let's start with the cover. It's definitely a cover. It's covering. Purple text on a purple background. That was an interesting choice. Let's take a look at the back. You know what? There's a lot of names on the back here, but I'm not going to mention any of them because more than likely they don't know they're on here. Just more contributors who didn't know they were contributing, right, Steve? In fact, I think I just found an example of that. If you'll look in the author bio here, you'll see where it says Marshall returns to his wheelhouse of short story novel writing. And on the back here, I'll cover up the name because I doubt this person wrote this. If you can see that. Start with my thumb. Marshall returns to his wheelhouse of short story writing. Pretty similar. It's almost like the guy on the back didn't even write that. Sorry, guy on the back. Hey, I'm right there with you, guy on the back. I didn't know I was in this book either. As for the book itself, well, you know, I was going to make some jokes here, like, well, of course I like the stories, that's why I wrote them. Ha 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 ha. But, I take this shit very seriously. Plagiarism is the lowest, most despicable thing a person can do in the writing community. Stephen Marshall, you call yourself an editor? You shouldn't be allowed to edit a fucking grocery list. It's hard enough for indie writers trying to make it in this business without having to worry about pricks like you. So to all you writers out there, if this man offers to edit or publish your work, run the other way. Not only will he edit it very poorly, he'll also steal it. You know what? That's an old pick. Can we get something a little more current? You're all probably wondering why there's a Pinellas County Sheriff's Office watermark on this photo. Well, I'm not going to say anything one way or the other, but if you want to Google it, I can't stop you. So what's my final verdict on No Clock Smears or Windows by Stephen Marshall? Well, all I'll say about this is I liked it better when me and Brian John Peer wrote it. Hey Steve, you see this? This is the script I wrote for the thing I just filmed. And I came up with it all by myself. See, Steve? That's what writers do.